Club Candy, Chapter 4, Frozen Cups. The joy of the first frozen cups was a secret too bright and too pure to be kept. It spilled out from the Reynolds apartment, a vibrant, sticky sweet gospel that traveled on the whispers of children. It began as a simple, prideful boast from Joey to his friends, a declaration of the miracle his mother had wrought. "My mama made 'em," he'd said, his chest puffed out with a proprietary air, a faint red stain still coloring his lips like a badge of honor. Frozen cups, better than any old popsicle. At first, there was disbelief, then a cautious, hungry curiosity. The neighborhood children, their own lives circumscribed by the same relentless heat and the same gnawing want, were drawn to the Reynolds' front stoop as if by an invisible, irresistible string. They would stand at a respectful distance, their bare feet dusty, their eyes wide with a potent mixture of envy and hope, watching as the Reynolds children savored their crimson holy grails. The longing in their faces was a language Eleanor understood without the need for words. It was the same universal, unspoken dialect of desire she saw in the eyes of her own children, a universal ache for a small measure of pleasure in a world that offered them so little. One afternoon, as she handed out the day's ration to her own, a small girl named Sarah, Miss Hattie's granddaughter from down the way, stood watching, her thumb stuck firmly in her mouth, her gaze fixed on the dripping red ice with an intensity that was almost painful. On an impulse that felt as natural as breathing, Eleanor popped an extra one from the tray. "You want one, baby?" she asked, her voice as gentle as a benediction. Sarah's eyes grew impossibly wide. She looked from Eleanor's kind face to her own grandmother, who sat fanning herself on a nearby stoop, a silent, formidable matriarch, for permission. Miss Hattie, a woman whose face was a roadmap of sorrows and survivals, gave a slow, deliberate nod. The girl scurried forward, her small hand reaching out, and took the frozen cup as if it were a holy sacrament, a piece of the Eucharist. That single, simple act of generosity was the pebble dropped into the still, stagnant pond of the neighborhood. The ripple spread instantly, a wave of hope. The next day, there were 5 children waiting, a small, hopeful congregation. The day after, 10. They came not with demands, but with a hopeful, silent plea in their eyes. They came with pennies clutched in their sweaty palms, coins they had found or earned or begged from their own mothers who had a penny to spare, but not the nickel for the store, not the nickel for the white man's world. Eleanor, seeing the coins, was hesitant. This had started as a thing for her own, an act of love, not of commerce. But then she looked at the hopeful, upturned faces, and she looked at the cost of the sugar and the Kool-Aid, and she understood that this was a different kind of transaction. It was a circle. It was an economy of their own making. The pennies would allow her to make more, to spread the sweetness further, to build something that was theirs. "A penny," she said, and the word felt right in her mouth. It was a fair price, a price that did not exploit, but sustained. A price that recognized the dignity of both buyer and seller. Her front porch became the vibrant, beating heart of the neighborhood's afternoon life. The children would line up, their pennies ready, and Eleanor would dispense the frozen cups with a quiet, dignified grace. She became a figure of immense importance, a purveyor of joy, a priestess of sweetness. They didn't call her Mrs. Reynolds. They called her the Candy Lady, a name spoken with a mixture of reverence and a deep, abiding affection. Miss Hattie would watch the daily ritual from her stoop, a knowing, ancestral look in her ancient eyes. One evening, as Eleanor swept the porch, the setting sun turning the sky to a bruised, tender purple, she called out to her, "You doing a good thing, child." Eleanor paused, leaning on her broom. The weariness of the day settled in her bones. "It's just frozen Kool-Aid, Miss Hattie." "No, it ain't," the old woman said, her voice a raspy, powerful whisper that carried across the dusty air. "My grandmama, she used to sell sweet potato pies out her back door right after slavery times. Said it wasn't about the pie, it was about feeding the soul, giving folks a taste of something good that was theirs, that the white man couldn't touch, couldn't tax, couldn't take away. She looked at Eleanor, her gaze sharp and clear, a beam of light in the gathering dusk. You ain't just selling frozen cups. You're selling a piece of joy. You're selling a piece of freedom. And that's a powerful thing. The old woman's words settled deep in Eleanor's spirit, giving a name, a history, a lineage to the feeling she'd had since that first morning in her kitchen. This wasn't just a way to make a few extra pennies. It was a continuation of something, a legacy of resilience. She was feeding the soul of her community, one frozen cup at a time. Her enterprise grew. She bought more ice trays. She experimented with new flavors, grape, orange, lime, creating a rainbow of choices that delighted the children and brought a splash of color to the drab, brick and dirt landscape. Her front porch was no longer just a porch. It was a place of business, a community hub, a safe haven where children could gather and, for a few blissful, sticky moments, just be children. The sound of their laughter and chatter became the new soundtrack to the summer afternoons, a sound that was, to Eleanor's ears, sweeter than any music. The ripple was growing, and she was at its center, a quiet, steady, powerful presence, the candy lady in her kingdom of ice and sugar. Next episode, Chapter 5, The Reckoning.